Oh my goodness, this is one of Yoko Ono's sisters.
Welcome to M's Adventures and Stories. Today we're continuing our conversation with Jason, the nude art model. Enjoy.
As I was typing her name in, her last name, O-N-O, Ono. Clicking around, found her website. So I saw her drawings, her sculptures. She had a couple news articles she linked to. And I'm looking at it like, oh my goodness, this is one of Yoko Ono's sisters. Yes, and so here I am modeling in her studio. You know, it's like, how incredible is that?
One step from a Beatle.
Yeah. Well, and then there was, I worked with Rob Liberace, who was related to Dee Liberace.
Oh.
This was years ago.
And was he also musical, or he's an artist?
Pardon?
Was he musical or an artist?
Artist. Rob Liberace.
Oh, okay. Oh, I've seen him. He's
Yeah.
very good.
Yes.
I like his style a lot. I think I might have been stalking him a little bit. Because I think I saw some stuff and I was like, wow, who is this person? They're fantastic. So that's a brother? Or how are they related?
I believe they were brothers.
Nephew.
Or maybe younger brother. I'm not too sure, but I know there is
Must
a
be
relation.
nephew or something. Liberace would be like, I don't know how old he'd be, but... So, the basics are, most sessions are usually, it's a teaching opportunity for the students, for the artists. And so it'll be like short poses, and then medium poses, and then a long pose?
Generally. Like, if I were to give like a hypothetical almost, that would be kind of like, this is what maybe a new model would most likely expect.
Yeah.
You would probably do about 5 or 10 minutes of 1 to 2 minute gesture poses.
Okay.
Then you might do a couple of 5-minute poses, then maybe a 10-minute pose, and there's probably a break at somewhere there. And then you would probably move into like maybe a 15-minute, a 20-minute, and then finish up the day with either one long pose after that, or maybe another 20-minute pose, a break, and another 20-minute pose. But there's sometimes where you'll hold the same pose the entire session, sometimes for multiple sessions.
Okay. Because they're doing something in depth. And do you have a preference, like what you like better?
I much prefer gesture poses. And a lot of artists don't like gesture poses, and I can kind of understand why. Because you want to draw one quote-unquote nice picture as opposed to a bunch of poses or a bunch of sketches that are going to be, by the nature of the virtue pose, very abbreviated. Because you're not going to have that much time to squeeze in all the detail you would like to. I like it because, I mean, I've done some acting before. It allows me to be creative. Not that you can't be creative in a longer pose, but you have to really consider ahead of time what your pose is going to be, because you're going to be holding it for a while, and it may hurt.
So, let's talk about the pain. Because I don't think anybody thinks that being an art model, do it if you're a masochist. Because the reality is, it's very painful.
It is.
So, have you ever taken Pilates or yoga?
No.
So, because I would think it's kind of like Pilates.
It's a number of things. I'll remember, like I said, when I first read your review on Yelp, and I thought, oh, I can sit for a couple hours and get paid.
Yeah, let's go back to that. So,
it hurts.
I was taking an art class, and we had this model, and I remember she wasn't doing anything unusual. I have a feeling she was standing, just kind of standing with her arms to her sides, maybe. But I like faces, so I was looking at her face intently, and just without really saying anything, there were these tears like running down her face. So like she was in some sad place or cathartic place. I thought it was a catharsis thing. But what do you think it was?
It's interesting because the other thing I was going to mention, it's funny how this all ties together. I was going to say, I don't think that the modeling so much is like in terms of like Pilates or yoga as much as like meditation, because your brain will go.
Because there is the brain part of you too. Exactly. I'm just thinking about the physical, but your brain has to do something.
Exactly, and your mind will wander. You have to be cognizant. It's okay to let your mind wander, but you have to, again, not your face and your body can't betray what it is you're thinking. You still have to be still. What I surmise, when I first read your review, I thought, oh my God, maybe it was something where she was behind on the rent and she had to go ahead and do this and she didn't. No, that was not it. What I surmise happened.
I think that is a very, how should one call it? Like a first drafter approach. It's too simple of an explanation.
Exactly, because I'm thought like, well, wait a second.
Like she's forced into prostitution because she doesn't have any rent to pay.
Right. Yeah. So, and then I thought about it, and I thought about that moment after doing this for about a year, and I thought, I know why she was crying. Her brain probably took her someplace. It doesn't even necessarily mean it was a painful moment in her past, like maybe she thought about her loved one who had passed away or something. It's funny, when I did that first gig with you, towards the last 20 minutes, I remember they were playing some classical music because the band had already packed up at that point. And I had this weird vision that I was looking at a black and white movie in French where it was a trail just kind of leading towards the horizon.
And so you really were tripping.
Yes. And it was not because...
That really is meditation.
Oh, it is. And it was like, because I didn't watch like a Criterion Collection film before coming to class.
But it was such an odd experience because we had this thundering, blasting, just absolutely out of your body level of noise coming from next door with the band. I mean, it was so hard to even like sit or let alone think.
Right.
Because it was so noisy.
Yes.
And not with any like regularity because they were practicing. So they would like stop and then they would like start again, and it was just noise.
And then have to wait out to the car and come back and then start up again. And, hey, that wasn't a good take. Let's start again. And so it was not like.
And then when it stopped, it was completely a contrast because it was so quiet. Yeah. And through all of this, you're like having your first experience nude modeling, taking your clothes off. I mean, like, because you were wearing this very tiny afro. Yeah, I think I was barely able to cinch it up. And I was like, and I don't even remember if it was a particularly feminine robe. Like, it wasn't. It was like maroon colored. It was kind of neutral.
Right, like it didn't have like any butterflies on it. But it was just
like you're not a short or a small person.
Right.
But, it was a robe for someone who was many sizes less than you.
Yeah.
And shorter than you. And,
right.
And it was hilarious.
Yeah. It's to the point where I think at that point I was glad to get the darn thing off. Just like, okay, I look less ridiculous nude than I do wearing this robe that is designed for a woman, a petite woman at that.
Yeah. Well, this is what I say, for example, and this is perhaps another podcast subject, but when I get massages, they will always say, oh, and you can, leave your underwear on. And I always say, you know what? Having you delicately moving my thong or my underwear aside is much more sexual than if I'm just naked and letting you get to your work.
Exactly. And there's like places that they won't even, like I've had massages where they don't even go near the glute area.
I know. I'm like, I want you to get right into my sciatic nerve.
Right. It's one of the largest muscles in the body.
Yeah, I need to get up there.
There's nothing smarmy about it.
Yeah.
But
that is not sexual at all. Like I got pain in my biggest muscle, and I need a professional to get up there. Yeah.
I need someone to wail on my
Yeah, I'm happy with the elbow. I don't mind the heel.
Get in there.
Whatever, So anyway, massage, that's a different subject altogether. But actually kind of ties, not that it's massage, but the reason that I got into yelping was because I ran into you in the grocery store.
Yes.
And because we had known each other from grad school, and it was after we were done with the program, and then I ran into you in grad school, and I was like, "What are you up to?" You know, and you were like, "I've started writing a lot more Yelp reviews because it's a good writing exercise." And I thought, "Wow, I've never thought about that." Because I had always wanted to be a writer since I was 9 years old, you know, so sort of I wanted to write the all-American novel, be the next Steinbeck, Hemingway, whatever, right? Anyway, so then I went online and I read some of your Yelp reviews, and I got to the one where you talked about having a Brazilian wax.
Yes, I knew you were going to.
And when I read that review, it's not that long. It's like most of the Yelp reviews are only like 500 words, I think. But I am fairly sure snot came out of my nose and probably some wee came out of other parts of me because I laughed out loud so hard at your review. And the line that I remember the most was where you talked about clear cutting the forest and how the first one is...
Could I get another Pilsner, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tell me the crowd tip as well. Do you want any more of it?
No. No,
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks. Where you talked about...
You want some of my fries?
No.
It's
I'm
good.
stuffed. I still have the sundae to come.
Oh my God, that's right.
I still have dessert. But you talked about how the first waxing is the hardest to get through because
Yes.
they have to clear cut the forest.
Yeah, what they have to do is because naturally you're going to be more hirsute than if you do this regularly. They've got to trim the area with scissors and then...
Oh, is that how it works?
Yes.
They don't use a little razor first to trim it down to like a half, like a little marine cut?
No. They don't give you the buzz cut like you're enlisting. They don't use like a set of like, what do you call those, like Norelco trimmers.
No, again, no underwriting from them.
No, yes, no underwriting for them, yes. So it's snip, 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 and then they get to putting on the wax and pulling everything off.
But I would think, this is completely away from the nude model, but it is sort of related. I would have thought that the second, third, 15th time you had it done would be worse because you would know what it was like.
That's what I thought, but there were only one or two places that historically I twitched in anticipation, like the bad kind. That I just go, okay,
God, you don't want to blink.
Right, where it's
you don't
like,
want to blink when they got that.
Right, it's like, okay, there's one particular sensitive part that I already know it's coming.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if someone was going to punch you in the face, but they weren't.
Are you talking about the Nifkin? The Nifkin?
Oh, no, yeah.
That little space?
No, where the scrote meets the, yeah.
Yeah, that space in between.
Yes, exactly.
It's called the Nifkin, I think.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I think I used to call it, yeah, it's actually got a name.
Well, I think there's like more nerves there than like any place else there
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So surprise, that's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that's one of those ones where, you know,
Yeah.
should give you a a little bit of warning. Hey,
It's definitely
this is,
not G-rated.
Yeah.
This conversation is not
No.
made for children.
No.
Although that's a whole different thing. I don't know why they shouldn't know about this kind of stuff, but whatever. It's not a career, though. You're not going to make a living as a nude model.
No, you're not. I mean, I do know.
So again, let's ask then, how much did you get paid?
Going rate nowadays, I want to say, is about $20 per hour. Could be more.
Wow.
Just because I've just got my feet wet back into the industry. I would even say though, when I started back in 2008, it was $20 an hour for 3 hours. Thank you very much. Thank you. So it's like $20 an hour for 3 hours typically. So $60.
That's good.
If it's a drawing group, usually you get paid cash. If it's a school, you typically get paid with a check, and then you have to, you know, they send you the tax forms and all that stuff.
Yeah. And now, did they ever tip?
I've only been tipped once. None of the venues. It's kind of funny because when I first started out, I got more work through colleges and universities, and obviously there they don't tip or anything like that.
Yeah.
Just because generally they try and have an even mix of male and female models, whereas drawing groups a lot of times they've been burned enough with like models who are flaky and didn't show up, that once you have that cadre of experienced models, on the one hand you're always looking for new blood, on the other hand it's kind of like, we'd prefer a guy who they've seen already or a woman they've seen already, but we know they're going to show up. Generally, but generally the art schools would pay with a check. Drawing groups would pay, usually cash. Tips, again, because most of my gigs that I've worked, it never came up, but I do know that there are venues where they will have a tip jar in addition to the base rate the model gets. But in my experience, I've only gotten tipped once or twice. And I think one of the times was because there was an artist in the room who also ran a drawing group, and I think he had to cancel one time, so I think that was his kind of way hey, taking care of me, and just, sorry, I had to cancel that booking, something came up, here's a little, I want to make it, So, that's the other thing, is things can come up where classes get canceled due to low enrollment. So
because they have to have a minimum. They're like, we have to have 4 or 6.
Exactly.
And then they cancel, but they've already booked you.
Right. So I tell people, even if you've got several bookings lined up for the next month or two, don't treat that as money in the bank. Don't spend against it, because there will be times where, hey, we only got 3 people to sign up for this class. University says we have to have at least 6 people, so we got to cancel.
And so, up to how late can they cancel your booking?
I don't know if there's an official answer to that. I would say usually you'll find out about a week or so before the class starts.
Oh, okay.
Now that means, you might not have been the first model for the class.
Right.
Sometimes what they do is they book multiple models. So
yeah.
I could have been, for let's say a spring semester,
yeah.
I could have been the last model in May, but I would find out something in early February. Yeah, hey, class didn't get full.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But that's pretty good. I was thinking it's 3 hours till the class, and then they're like...
Oh, no. Although, the other thing that happens is sometimes models can be double booked, where it usually happens in a college setting. It doesn't really happen with drawing groups, but you'll have 2 people show up for one booking, and clearly they only need one model.
Oh, okay.
Actually, no, it happened for a drawing group too, and in that case, it turns out it was the other model who got double booked. I was the model that was intended. The monitor gave him $20 to say, hey, I'm sorry, yeah, do that. But I remember there's one institution it was the Corcoran, and it was me and another model. Actually, no, what happened was I met the professor, and she's like, did you bring your swim trunks? And I'm like, no, are we going swimming? Turns out there was a woman in the class who had a religious issue with seeing the naked form, man or woman.
Oh.
So I guess what they did was, in the meantime, the other model showed up, and he had swim trunks because the model coordinator told him, hey, bring swim trunks because this woman cannot see a fully nude man or woman.
I would think that then that person should not sign up for a class like that.
That's what I would have loved to have known, because I had asked David Quammen, the previous head. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was the head.
Did he?
He did.
He was the most famous male model in DC.
Oh, easily. He's had newspaper articles written about him. I sought his counsel for that, because I said, hey, what had happened was I got double booked, but before I found out that the correct model was supposed to be there, the professor said, hey, can you pose in your underwear? And I told David that, and he said, if I were you, I would have said, no, you're not an underwear model. I would have, if that person has an issue with the nude form, they should not be in that class.
Yeah.
And in fact, I had worked with that professor a few classes prior to that, And she approached me in the hall and said, hey, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to kind of sit in the hall for a couple of minutes. I've got another model who's, I guess she was going to be in like either a bikini or whatever, was going to demonstrate some figure poses, and then, you know, you're going to go on stage and you're going to do long poses. And I saw the woman in question leave the room a couple minutes before I got on, but all I could think of was, if you're going to an art school, the only thing I could think of, it was she might have been in some sort of either fashion design or some other art adjacent major, and she might have had, hey, for a general elective, you've got to take a drawing class. I still am
No, in a case like that, you recuse yourself.
Right, exactly.
She should have recused herself and said, I can't.
Don't know why that didn't take place. The person, I believe, was from overseas. I don't know if that had something to do with it, like they paid more tuition, and hey, maybe we don't want to make this person's parents angry, so everyone else will have to
Or they could have
punish.
placed her in a place with a thing blocking you.
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
Where she couldn't see. You know. Anyway, that is weird. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, I'm a guy. I couldn't even tell you what color my underwear is that I'm wearing today. I'm like, God only knows if it's got holes in it or it's threadbare. I'm like, nobody wants to have memories about their dad getting out of bed. You know, it's like it's just
like that's just wow. Yeah, no.
And I was still a fairly new model at the time, so like I didn't know how to handle that. I was always.
Or they could have like just draped something over you. Like I'm sure there was some nasty old piece of drapery.
Oh.
There's always some nasty old piece of drapery in an art studio.
You reminded me of something. I'll finish this story and I'll get into that. The professor was clearly at the end of her rope. She was not a fan of this whatsoever, but you could tell her hands were tied. She probably already fought the administration, and it just wasn't, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to teach here, kind of.
Yeah.
But
it sounds like it was like, oh, this is the owner's daughter or the owner's niece from abroad, and
that's like, hey, just Mr. So and so, he's kind of underwriting us some very fat checks. Let's so what you reminded me of. I had a female friend who I got into modeling because she was really intrigued by it, and I took her to the Figure Models Guild, and she only modeled for a year or two because she ended up getting married, and she told her, I guess, the fiance at the time, and he didn't put his foot down, but it was kind of like one of those, like, well, I think she thought, like, with a lot of things, there's compromise. She wasn't, I don't know, but at any rate, she called me up one day and she said, hey, something happened. It was for the Hillier. They have a drawing group, and she was working for them, and she said, hey, something came up. I've got a proposal that's due last minute. Is there any way you could take this job for me? So I said, okay, do me a favor, contact the coordinator first, just because sometimes, 99% of the time they're cool with it, but sometimes, like, if they hired you as a model, it's because they wanted somebody who looks similar to you. The idea, hey, if we hired a female model, we'd rather have a female model as a replacement.
Yeah.
So she's like, oh, I spoke with the person. He's looking forward to having you. And so I called him up and I said, just, hey, I want to introduce myself. And I said, I'm looking forward to this. I was like, just so you know, I don't have my modeling kit here. I don't have my robe. And he's like, oh, no, that's okay, that's fine. And I'm like, again, I'm still a fairly new model. I'm like, okay, it's going to get interesting. So I said, I'll just, oh, please, thank you very much.
So you were new to this.
Yes.
And you didn't know what your rights, so to speak, or what you should do.
Exactly.
Could do.
So what he said, like, he would have been perfectly.
He's like, I'll lend you my underwear.
Yeah. Oh,
no.
Goodness, no.
No, that would have been horrible.
But he was obviously perfectly fine with, hey, if you just want to hang out, totally buck naked in front of everybody, that's okay. It's like, okay. So just do me a favor, if you can police up some manner of fabric, I'd be most appreciative.
Yeah.
So when I got there, he's a great guy. In fact, I've worked with him at the Washington Studio School recently. I love working with this guy.
Yeah.
So that's the first time I've worked with him and said, hey, The only thing we were able to scare up was this like huge bolt of cloth that was more like a tapestry.
Okay.
So when I wrapped it up, I looked like Caesar. But I'm like, I'm not, especially, and the other thing was, if this was something where I had worked with these people before and they were expecting me, I would have been fine, you know, during a break, kind of sleeking off into a corner and just trying to be less obvious. But these people were expecting a very petite, very Mediterranean-skinned, lithe woman. They were not expecting a middle-aged, overweight, pale man.
Oh man, it dressed like Caesar.
And this gets back to the when you take your robe off, when you don't, and when to kind of read the room for those sorts of things. After the timer went off for the last time, I was like, I'm not dragging this big, heavy bolt of cloth back with me to the bathroom. I'm just going to drop it and zoom in. So there's a couple people in front of me, and one of the women just kind of, as I was moving, said, hey, you know, you did a really great job. You know, we were expecting so-and-so, but, you know, you did good. So we're talking for a minute or two, and then I realized I'm having a conversation, and I'm not wearing any clothes. So I'm like, oh, if you just excuse me, I'm just going to go in and make myself proper. But, yeah, the dynamics of how you do everyday things.
Yeah.
Kind of, and that's one of the reasons I started my blog, was because, well, there's a lot of social cues you have to pick up on, or I wouldn't say you have to pick up on, but like you're doing something that like almost nobody can really do, and there's not.
No, because most people, you know, their greatest fear is public speaking and being naked in front of other people. Mm-hmm. They would rather die before either of those things. Yeah, and so and I mean, yes, people would rather die in front of this. So then that makes me ask: Are you a nudist? Like, you know, like, would it be easier if you were a nudist?
I'm not. I don't have anything issues with it. I will say that there have been in the past some people who do get into the profession who are nudists, or I guess naturalists is what you call them these days.
Yes, they're naturalists, yeah.
Some can make the distinction of like, hey, you know, I'm comfortable being nude, but this is not at a nudist retreat. You know, I'm going to put my robe back on during the breaks, and they can separate those two worlds. I've heard other people, they kind of can't make that decision, and or that when there's a break, you know, they might be walking around in the nude, looking at other people's artwork, and I'm thinking, I'm not a prude by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
They're here to draw you while you're nude. They're not here to hang out and have social hour. Again, I've worked
and it's one thing looking at somebody naked on stage, and another having them standing there, you know, with their junk at eye level.
Exactly. That, you know, so those people, I think, kind of...
I shouldn't say junk. That sounds terrible. Jewels.
Yeah,
with their
exactly.
jewels at eye level.
Jewels. Yes. And all those... And again, there's other times where I've worked a group session. And it's funny because this is something that sounds like something that's out of everybody's worst nightmare, where you all get together and you disrobe prior to going on stage, and you're talking with other people just like basic shop talk. Hey Frank, how's it going today? Oh, I had a crappy day at work. Takes off your shirt, blah blah blah. Hey, you know, Sarah, how are you doing? Oh, okay. It's one of those. If you've ever seen a Paul Verhoeven movie, like
I think I have.
Starship Troopers, RoboCop.
Oh, yeah.
He's very big on having like mixed nude scenes for like a brief second or two that are totally non-sexual in nature.
Yeah.
Very
Just
so
kind of a little shock.
Exactly.
Shock factor, just to make sure you're awake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So let's go back to, well, there's a little break here, your thought process. Let's go back to, why do you think there are more male models in DC? Is it because there's a larger homosexual population?
I don't know, because one of the things that David Quammen definitely made clear was that he believed that there was some homophobia in the art community at large.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's why he thought male models weren't in as much demand. He did tell me, he said, hey, if I had to guess, the ratio of male to female models was probably 60-40 he didn't know specifically why that was the case, but he did speculate that homophobia did have some sort of role to play in why males may not be in as much demand. I can say I have not experienced anything where I thought that might be the case, although it's funny.
But who are the people who are calling or hiring the models? These people are usually the teachers, right?
Exactly.
Or an art school coordinator. I mean,
right.
These people are...
So I don't know.
Are they as a group more homophobic? I wouldn't think so.
So I wouldn't think so either, which is kind of at first...
I just never really think... I always think of artists as being quite...
tolerant and open,
yeah,
Yeah. And that's what I thought too. So I was a little surprised when he said that, but I thought, okay, he's been doing this longer than I've been alive. Yeah. He's got to have some sort of basis for it.
Yeah.
I have never seen anything approaching that. What I think it is, I can't tell you why there's more men than women, because I've heard in other places it's the opposite, that it's men who are difficult to find, it's the women who are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
I have no idea why it's like this. Maybe possibly DC being a more conservative area, not politically, but in terms of social mores.
Yeah.
Some women might think, hey, I don't want, if this ever gets out, I want to get married. I don't know. I am speculating.
Actually, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's because the women who are here are more highly educated and therefore do not, they may have jobs that where they don't need to do art modeling.
Or
you know
it could,
what I mean?
or if it's found out, maybe it could have
or
some
it would be,
consequences.
political or something. It's not, like I'm not going to go work and be a civil servant and then do this on the side or something like that. And I say this simply because when I was at university, our art models were not allowed to be students at our own school for this reason. And so they came from a neighboring school, which was, I think, an Ivy League school. And so we had the most highly educated, or soon-to-be most highly educated. We had pre-med students. We had whatever, but it paid a lot. And, so it was funny because, these people are going to go on to be really highly paid, highly educated people. And here they were doing a little art modeling. And because, again, it is not a creepy, lecherous thing at all.
No.
We would sit there and I actually, in some of my classes, I got a little annoyed because I feel like one of my teachers may have been hiring the same model because he kind of had the hots for her. And I was like, could you just date her already?
Yes.
And can we move on? Because we don't want to do the same person.
Right.
We want to do someone different, We want a new body.
Right.
A new face, a new whatever,
And it's funny you mention that, too, because this kind of piggybacks to what we were just talking about. I was talking with a female professor who I've worked for several times, and she was not from the area. She moved here from the South about maybe a year before I started art modeling. And she was telling me she was going to different drawing groups, and there was one that she went to, and they would seemingly exclusively use female models. So she made an observation like, hey, so when are we going to get to draw some guys? And he said the people next to her looked at her like she had three heads.
Yeah.
Why would we want to do that?
Yeah, and I think that's true. I mean, and it's interesting to me, the whole thing with the ratio between the female and male models, because I have a background in art history, and generally in art history,
oh, I'm full. That was delicious.
Would you like to look at the dessert menu?
Could I just get a cup of coffee, please?
And I have a dessert.
The sundae, right?
Oh, yeah, regular, please.
Regular cream and sugar?
A cream, please. Thank
He
you.
wants regular coffee, but I get a sundae.
Hey, thank you very much.
But the ratio is that generally in art, throughout the millennia, art has been about the male gaze, and that's what it's called, right? So it's interesting to me that there would be more. I mean, when I was at university, it was very rare that we had a male model in drawing class, clothed or unclothed.
Right.
Because that was just not something that most young men or old men, because our models didn't have to be college students, that they were gonna be like, oh, let me go be a model. No,
Right.
that wasn't something that men thought.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's, and then if you do, it's like, again, because men can have body insecurity images just like women
course.
do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it's interesting to me that there are more here than of the females.
And generally, if I had to describe, like if you said, hey, what's the average male or female art model here? I would say the average male...
What do they look like?
The average male art model will probably be late middle-aged or older, generally either retired or probably soon to be retired. The average woman would probably be in her 20s or 30s. And I've had this discussion with a female model, and it's because we were both, it was almost reversed. I was one of the younger male models. She was one of the older female models. And it was like we both kind of like, I don't want to say bucked the system, but we were kind of like almost the exception to the...
Outliers.
The outliers. And again, I can't tell you why that's the case, that, modeling here might attract older men. Maybe you've got a lot of free time, and now that you're not working anymore, you can pursue these things. You're not worried about any potential blowback. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that I think one of the things that set me apart was I was a model in my mid-30s.
Yeah.
You really didn't have that. There'd be a few models that were younger, and generally most of them were a bit older.
Yeah.
In addition to being definitely overweight at the time, I still wasn't that far removed from when I was thinner and worked out. So I was fat but had stamina at the same time.
Yeah, that's good.
Right, and it was funny, one of my art model friends, she said, we were on a conversation, this is years ago, she's like, I'm always singing your praises to like people I work with, that, he's an overweight model, but he can hold athletic poses, so you're kind of getting a dynamic that doesn't really,
well, frankly,
exist.
I mean, from the artist's perspective, it doesn't really matter what you look like. It matters that you can get back to the same position you were in.
And that's tough.
Because it's hard enough to draw, paint, whatever somebody, and then if they're not in the same position, that is really hard.
And it's tough. And it was something that I think I was really good at in my heyday. Coming back to it after COVID and only having worked a couple of gigs, it was definitely tougher than I remembered. And the first time I definitely had more of a difficult go of it. And I frankly told the students there, hey, look, if you're seeing something that doesn't look like it was before, let me know, I'll move around. And there were some times where it wasn't anything exaggerated, but there were a couple times where we had to spend a minute or two getting me back into pose.
It does take a while, yeah.
Second time, not as bad. But you can even tell sometimes where you haven't gotten into the exact same pose, but it's close enough because, hey, my back doesn't hurt like it was hurting the last 20 minutes. I'm feeling pain slightly in another muscle just a little over.
Yeah, because your body knows. It's like dancing. Thank you.
Oh, that looks good.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Yeah. I have to take a quick pause here. Resume.
It's
okay. Before the commercial break, the Sunday break. Ooh. Oh, the nuts are crushed. I love it. Okay, as I segue straight into the dirty talk. No, sorry, we're going to stay completely clean, but let's address the other elephant in the room. Yes. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So, how as a man, like we all know men, I don't know, but basically men, they have one ruler, one master, and usually it's between their legs.
Yep.
And how do you keep that from sticking its head up, so to speak, when you're modeling? Has it ever happened?
Come back next time to hear about if it has ever happened. Thanks for now. This has been M's Adventures and Stories.